Welcome to today's episode of the Mindset Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Dial. If you have not yet done so, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. I have a special guest and a special podcast that I'm doing right now. It might sound a little bit different to you guys. I'm in my living room and I'm with my amazing wife, Lauren.
Hi.
Lauren and I are going to talk about life. We're going to talk about our relationship. I want to start having Lauren on a little bit more to give you a little bit of perspective from a female, because obviously it's a different perspective than me. But also I want to personally just share myself a little bit more versus just feeling like I'm only teaching. I want to kind of give my perspective of life in a little bit more low-key, laid-back way, like we're sitting on my couch right now. And you know, talk about love, talk about relationships, talk about life, talk about everything that happens as life happens. And before we do that, Lauren and I are just going to talk about ourselves. And so in lessons that we've learned in the past 10 years of being together, and lessons we've learned about ourselves, but also we've learned about being in a relationship and making a relationship work. And we don't pretend to have it figured out in any sort of way.
No.
We are two flawed individuals trying to figure this shit out. And so we just hope to give you guys a perspective, and maybe you can listen to it and say, hey, I learned something from that. If you don't care about love or relationships, you could definitely skip on to the next episode if you want to.
Bye.
No worries. We don't feel bad about it at all. But this is one of the reasons why I went from 3 episodes a week to 4 episodes a week last year. The podcast used to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now it's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, because I wanted to try to do a little bit more long form, so that you guys can hear some banter. And I'm going to interview people. People are going to interview me. We're going to have longer conversations. And so if you guys do like it, let us know. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about our relationship over the past 10 years, what we've learned in different challenges and life circumstances that have come up. And then at the end, we're going to tell you guys why we're with each other.
Why we choose to be together.
Why we choose to be with each other. And that's how we're going to end today's episode. And so, Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here and do this.
I'm excited to have you here. Let's talk about the question that everybody always asks us, which is how we met. And so, Lauren, how did we meet?
We met on a wine tour, which is perfect because we love wine. And we met through mutual friends. Was it somebody's birthday?
Yeah, it was our friend Teresa's birthday. Okay,
so it was a birthday tour, like a party bus situation that I was actually late for, but I came with a girlfriend. We met up with all of you guys. And I was running late that day, which is why I didn't make it to the party bus on time. And I was hungry, and I plopped myself down eating all of the meats and cheeses stuff that I could find. And then that's when you walked up.
Yeah. And then my friend who I walked up with, Nathan at the time, asked for some meat that you had. And so you started sharing your meat and cheeses with us.
Yes.
And we didn't exchange numbers. After the party, we ended up going our separate ways, and I was texting our mutual friend and saying, hey, you guys could we're at some bars downtown. This is when I used to party, right? We're down on 6th Street. We're actually on Dirty 6 if you've ever been to Austin. And I was like, come to this bar. And then 20 minutes after we left, magically you guys would be at that bar. And so you guys never actually met with us.
We just kept missing you.
Kept missing us.
By minutes.
Yeah. And then we ended up going to it was me, you, and our friend Alan.
Yeah.
Ended up going about a week later to brunch, and we went to brunch, and we had a really good day. We went to a bar. We were all watching football, and we were playing giant Jenga. And then you left me and Alan because you had another date to go on with another guy.
I did, but to be fair, I wasn't on a date with you. I wasn't. Of course not. I mean, I was going to brunch with you and Alan, and yeah, I had another. I mean, that was a last minute thing too. It's not like we're gonna meet this weekend and we're gonna go to brunch. And then I was like, okay, cool. So I'll plan my second date of the day for later. No, I just happened to I had been talking to somebody else for a little bit and had a date planned with him that night.
So my wife left me to go on another date is what we're saying.
When you say it like that now,
it sounds crazy, but it really wasn't. But what's really interesting about the whole thing is I turned to my friend at the time and I was like, don't worry, he's going to fuck it up. And that night,
He fucked it up.
Fucked it up. He got too drunk. He started yelling, getting belligerent, and you were like, I'm not dealing with this.
I was out, yeah.
You were out pretty much immediately, which was awesome. So, and then what happened was we didn't have each other's numbers, and you got my number from a mutual friend of ours, and you just text me out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And so you hit me up, and then we didn't meet up, and I kept trying to basically say like, hey, do you want to go on a date? You want to go like keep trying to do it. And then
the follow-up was strong.
The follow-up was strong. And then you just kept basically ghosting me.
Yeah. Well, I also lived in a different city.
Yeah.
So at the time I was living in San Antonio and you were here in Austin. So, yeah, I don't know. I was like at a point in time where I was really into just like living my life single. I wasn't really looking for a relationship. And it wasn't that I was like actively trying to ghost you. It just kind of kept falling off my radar. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Wow.
I was like, he's so sweet. Oh my God, I'm going to get back to him later. And then I just didn't.
Yeah. So, the thing about it is I was always in sales. And so I always knew from being in sales, you just keep following up until somebody says no. So you had never said no to me.
Right.
And I was like, all right, well, she got my number. She was interested, I guess. I'm going to keep following up. I think this chick's awesome. I think she's really beautiful. And I was like, I'm going to just keep following up until she says no. And she never said no. And eventually we went on a date. And that was January 11th of 2014. So we've been together for 10 years now. Yeah. And you were like, your kind of your intention was, I'm going to go on it because you had been single for a while. Yeah. I'm going to go on a date with this guy. And it's probably going to prove that I don't like this guy. Like he's great, he's good, but I just don't want to date right now.
I didn't have anything to lose, so I figured like let's just go for it.
Yeah, so we went on a date, and what happened?
I liked you.
And then?
A lot. And then you left the next day.
I left the next day for 6 weeks to go training for a company I was with. So then Lauren liked me, and I liked her. And then the very next day, I left to go to Tampa for training for a company that I worked with back then for 6 weeks.
Which was perfect.
Okay.
Because we did the old school, like talking on the phone for hours. Sounds super corny, and it's not something I'm into by any means. I don't actually like talking to people on the phone.
Neither do I.
So it was like the little ritual. Like I would get off work and then we'd talk to each other. I think you were watching like Dexter or something at that point. And you would like watch an episode.
I was watching Breaking Bad.
Okay, Breaking Bad. And you would tell me about it, and we would just talk and like all the little giggly, cute. Yeah.
And you were 25 at the time, and I was 27.
Yeah. So we got to know each other really well because all we did was talk for like the first 6 weeks. And so I think that was actually huge because by the time we saw each other for our like technically second date, I remember being so nervous because I like knew you and I really cared. Like I had a lot of time invested in like getting to know you. And so I liked you. And then seeing you again in person was like, oh my God, he's actually here. Yeah. But it was fun.
Yeah. So, and we came into the relationship as two completely flawed individuals with two completely different perspectives of life and ways that we were triggered. You know, I was 27, she was 25. And so we still to this day, we will never say that we have anything figured out or anything perfected. We're going to give our perspective of life and love and relationships. And, you know, maybe people will get some value out of it. But you weren't into personal development at all.
No.
And it was something that I like eat, sleep, and breathe at that point. And you weren't really into it. And at that point in time, what we're going to talk about it as we go through this episode today, besides learning us, is we're going to talk about what we've learned about ourselves and about being in a relationship with another person. And one of the things that I want to dive into is you, at the beginning of the relationship, saw a heightened emotional state as a equaling like interest.
Right.
And so, so walk us through that, and I'll kind of give my perspective of it. So, with past relationships that you came in, you were used to some heightened states, some yelling, some all of that stuff, and you equated that with like, hey, that means passion. That means that someone's interested. That means love in some sort of way.
Right. Yeah, I think you actually said it really well earlier. It was kind of like the more emotion that came through, which was really kind of like just like drama or passion, meant like there was something you were fighting for. And you are so chill and very grounded. And so I was working pretty hard to try to get something out of you to show me that I was worth fighting for.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, or that you cared.
Yeah.
Because that's how I perceived it at the time. And I had no idea, right? Because I'm like, I wasn't very self-aware at that point. I was 25 years old, just like used to whatever my past relationships had been. So it was an interesting thing getting your response or lack of at first, because to me, it felt like you didn't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I've just never really seen the reason to yell at somebody or to be that way. And so I've always just thought, kind of like the golden rule, like you treat people how you want to be treated. And so, but there's also, we're going to talk about in other episodes, like it's just very hard to offend me. Just because of I think I just have, after, 19 years of working myself, just a really good idea of who I am. And for someone to get mad at me is just their perspective or, whatever it might be. And, we had one moment, I'm curious your perspective of it and how I feel like it shifted after one moment specifically where I was sober because I was driving.
I don't love this story.
We don't have to tell the whole details, but the details, the very high level overview is that you had been drinking. We were at a pool party. I was completely sober. You had come over and said something to me and you were trying to get emotion out of me. Like you were
I said something rude. Like, let's just be clear. I mean, we don't have to, you can say what I said if you want to. But.
No, it doesn't matter. She had said something very rude. And my response to you is I looked you dead in the eye and your friend Nicole was right there. And I said, number one, nobody speaks to me that way. And number two, we're going to have a conversation about this later when we leave.
I was like, ooh.
And it wasn't, and I was having grown up, there's many other relationships where I would have just taken what you said and been like, there's something wrong with me. But I think I just got to the point where I knew what I wanted and knew how I wanted to treat somebody. I knew how I wanted to be treated. And I feel like everything shifted after that moment. And you really didn't equate, really heightened emotion with actually caring or be worthy, something to fight for.
Right. Well, because you were right. And I could clearly see what I did was wrong. And you dealt with it in a very direct and mature way. So there was no like, oh my God, I have to defend what I did. Oh my gosh, like I can't believe he said that to me or whatever. It's just like you put me in my place at that point when I needed to be put in my place because I was being a brat and I was being rude. And so I was like, oh, there's just no room for that in this relationship. And so I respected it. It made perfect sense. Yeah.
And like about 10 minutes later, you actually walked up to me and apologized. And so we didn't even have to really go into it deeply. We did a little bit in the car.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we were thinking is how did we come into this relationship and how do we come in as flawed individuals? And one of the things that we learned, and I think that was one of the things that you really learned was that just because someone's not yelling or quote unquote passionate, extremely high in emotions doesn't mean somebody doesn't care.
Right.
And doesn't mean that somebody doesn't think that you're worth fighting for. On the other side, me, the way that I came into the relationship and the way that I had not been good in other relationships was I didn't know how to let myself be vulnerable. And so I think that you had sensed that there was a wall up and it was really hard for me to like fully open up.
Right. Yeah. And I'm such like an open book and I give love very quickly and freely, and you were different.
Yeah.
So I think that as much as my natural tendency was to try to just like be vulnerable and open up to you, I could sense that you weren't completely. So then I kind of started to match that a little, and it created a little bit of a wall, a barrier between us, which over time it did do a little bit of a toll on us.
I think what really helped, we moved in with each other about a year and a half in. What really helped me kind of understand my problem with vulnerability was I went to a poker tournament, and in a poker tournament, the guy who sat next to me was a relationship therapist. And it was probably about a year and a half, 2 years into our relationship. And he's like, oh, your girlfriend, and you should come in. And I was like, that sounds cool. Let's just see what this guy has to say.
Yeah.
And so we went in, and I think what was really cool about going in and seeing a relationship therapist was that he kind of I think I left that. I remember driving after and being like, oh my God, I feel like I know myself so well, and I feel like Lauren knows me so well.
Yeah, it definitely helped.
It definitely helped us because I felt like we were kind of not seeing each other fully. And sometimes, you know, and it's not like there's anything wrong with the relationship. It was just like, we went into it of like, hey, let's try to see how we can improve and understand each other better. And, you know, he had recommended a couple books for us. One thing that I do remember he specifically had like hit me really hard was I was telling him about my childhood, and I was telling him about my father and, you know, and stuff. And he said, yeah, you were neglected as a child. And I was like, no, I wasn't. Like, because in neglect, I'm thinking in my mind, like I had food.
I literally remember this moment. Yeah. I like saw something click in you when he said that. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. And so I was like, no, I wasn't. Like everything was fine. Like I was thinking like neglect means like somebody wasn't there, or that I wasn't taken care of, or there, you know, that there wasn't food or water or any of that, shelter. And he goes, no, you were emotionally neglected. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And he said, so you guys basically have different love styles. And he taught us like how our nervous systems react to each other. And he said, Rob, and there was a book there's an audiobook that everybody can listen to if they want to. It's called Wired for Love. And he had us listen to that. The same guy who wrote that also wrote the book Attached years down the road, which we talks about attachment styles. And the way that he described it is there's 3 different ways that someone's nervous system is wired for love, based off of their childhood. And for you, the phrase was, you are an anchor. So there's an anchor, there's an island, there's a wave. An anchor is someone who's like very firmly set, you know, both your parents are still together.
Yep.
And so you were kind of like, felt like love was in the household. For me, I was an island, which means like I was used to being alone. And you get used to being alone when you're a child. And so, you know, my mom had to work a couple different jobs. My father wasn't always there. I was what they call a latchkey kid. So like I would walk home, you know, after school bus, and I let myself in at like 9 years old, and I was just used to being alone. And then a wave is someone who bounces in between island and anchor. And I remember specifically because you would come in and want to give me love like immediately, and it didn't feel safe. And the reason why I didn't feel safe is because, in the way he explained it, is that you need to give Rob's nervous system time to get used to your nervous system, because he's so used to being alone that you can't just fly into a room and be like, oh my God, I'm so glad to see you. And you know, obviously that's changed a lot over the past 8 years. Yeah. But for you to understand, like his nervous system's not accepting yours immediately. Yeah.
That was huge for me to hear, because I remember still even like hearing him tell us that. I couldn't understand it because it was so, I mean, I could understand what he was saying, but to wrap my head around how I needed to support that was something that took me a little bit of time, because it was so different from my own experience. Yeah,
for sure. And I think that was actually one thing that really that was probably one of the biggest moments first in our relationship was both of us going, yeah, we should work on this thing and try to get better at it, which I think is, you know, putting in effort is something that I think a lot of people want to see in a relationship. And so, you know, we got the audiobook Wired for Love. Yeah. We got the 5 love languages. We started figuring out each other's love languages, so that it wasn't like one of your love languages is acts of service. Right. And
that's the top one.
Right. It's your top one.
Yeah.
So like she thinks our cleaning lady is the most amazing person in the world.
And she loves
They've never had a conversation. She doesn't even speak the same language as her, but she loves our cleaning lady, Floricita, because she does acts of service for us. Right.
The best.
And so for me, like even reading that was like, oh, I didn't even realize. So like, you know, the other night I've been like fresh squeezing orange juice. Right. And so like, you were in the bathtub, and I was like, oh, I'm going to give her some orange juice. And so I made her some orange juice and brought it to her, because that is an act of service.
It was great. I loved that.
Right. And I didn't realize that is how you feel loved, which I think is really important when people are in relationships. Is we tend to give love the way that we want to be loved, but it's not always exactly the same. And so it's kind of like with love languages, they are languages. Like you could be speaking a different language than someone that you're in a relationship with.
Oh yeah. It's very common.
And so I think that's important for people to understand is, I think that was kind of a catalyst and kind of a changing point for us, because of the fact that we both saw each other putting in effort. And I think that made both of us realize, oh, this person wants to be with me. They want to work on this. They want to get better, versus try to keep things the same all the time.
Right. And then for me too, because I wasn't really into personal development, like I had said before, my level of awareness was kind of low, but I also hadn't done a deep enough dive into like, well, why is Rob the way he is? So it helped give me a new perspective because I had a better understanding of you. And I wanted for you to feel loved, and I wanted for you to feel safe accepting love. So it was also like just a huge aha moment for me to see more of who I was with and how I played an actual like very important role in your life in supporting you, and I wanted to support you. Yeah. So it became more exciting actually, I think too, to work on the relationship.
Yeah. And then, about 2.5 years into our relationship, we decided to go travel for 6 months.
Yeah.
And you ended up leaving the company that you were with.
Which was scary as fuck for me.
Right, which was very scary. You had never had a business before. I had businesses before that. And so I helped you grow a social media marketing company about 6 months before leaving. And so I'm curious with starting the business and also traveling, what do you feel like that did for you, but also for the relationship as well? So
we'd already been together for about 3.5 years at that point.
Yeah, 2002
17, 2.5. Okay. So I knew it was going to make or break us because we were kind of at this point where like we'd been working on things, but I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I was already thinking like Rob is the man I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. I wasn't sure. I was also terrified to leave at that point in time, I believed I was leaving my career and everything I'd worked hard for to start this thing on my own. And then also like moving way out of my comfort zone to travel for 6 months.
Which I had already done. I traveled by myself for 3 months. So I was definitely more in my comfort zone than you were.
Yeah.
I had already started businesses before. I had already traveled for 3 months by myself. You had never started a business before, and you had never traveled for an extended amount of time.
Yeah. So I was just jumping in. And also, I mean, like it was just going to be me and you, you and I. And I didn't know what that was going to be like, just you and I for 6 months away from home. And so I was like, this is either going to make us or break us. By the end of the trip, I mean, it made us, because the relationship that we came back with versus the one we left with was completely different. You supported me in so many ways, from helping me believe in myself with my business, but also like I had breakdowns in like every new city we went to along the way. It was like the travel days were always the ones that got me. Yeah. Remember that? I would have like a literal breakdown every travel day. So we would typically spend about 10 days in any city. Yeah. And it got really hard when we were in Prague. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Had left.
Yeah. My family had come to visit us while we were in Italy. And then we left to go to Prague. We'd been in Italy, I think, already for like about a month. So I had established some sort of like normalcy there, but then like kind of like shook everything up again. Already saw my family for the one time I was going to see them over the 6 months. And then, so like you supported me through all of that. And that was just one of the components that shifted everything in our relationship, but also like experiencing so many things, being out of my comfort zone, but feeling safe with you. That was huge. Is that I never felt unsafe, or like I didn't think that you couldn't take care of us while we were doing it. And so coming back with you and the relationship that we had at that point, it completely made our relationship.
Yeah. I forgot that you had so many breakdowns until you just said it. Because I'm like, there were so many. There was the first day when we were in New York, and we stayed in New York for a couple of days, and then we were about to leave.
Cried myself to sleep that night.
You cried yourself to sleep that night because you missed Toby so much.
Yeah, I was like, Toby's going to think I abandoned him. And I literally did for 6 months. So.
Right. And you didn't
felt
abandon
terrible.
him. You just went on a trip. So
It was a long one.
Right. You did have a breakdown in Prague. I remember you had a breakdown when we went to Croatia. There was multiple breakdowns.
Oh, yeah. I think that was like heat-induced breakdown too.
Yeah,
the place was
very
hot.
Tired. We almost missed our flight. And so, I didn't even think about that. Is I think that the main thing that you probably saw is like support, and not being like, you're ridiculous, get out of here, and yelling at you for another breakdown after another breakdown every 10 days after we'd be on another trip somewhere.
You were a very grounded, solid constant for me among all of the like chaos that was going on in my mind and like around me, I felt.
Yeah. And so then, and it was good because we were together for 6 months and we had like no fights. We had no blow-ups. Nothing went crazy. I
mean, we were on this trip where we were just staying in the tightest, closest, little smallest places all the time, working together
every day.
Yeah, I don't think there was a single day actually throughout that entire trip that we weren't together. So
no, there wasn't.
And that's pretty wild when you think about a couple being together only with one another for 6 months straight.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel so we came back around Christmas, you went to Florida and I went to San Antonio, and I legitimately missed you after I'd been with you for 6 months straight. Like that means something.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was another big thing that changed for us. And then what also I think changed, and we're just going through different parts of our relationship and how it's changed and how we've changed through it, was both of us doing psychedelics separately. And so I went and did psychedelics before you had ever done psychedelics.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, I'll give you my perspective of you, and I want to hear your perspective of me, and then also tell you what I changed, what I feel like changed within me. So when I went and did psychedelics, what do you feel like the shift was within me? What did you notice?
Well, there were some key things, but your self-awareness went up a lot. You also became more conscious of like your sense of control or your false sense of the control that you really wanted to have, but just, you know, like all of us don't have. And I think you also, as psychedelics will do, bring you in touch with your true self. And there's a much more loving side of you that existed that you just hadn't really allowed to like emerge or show up as much. And so that was one of the big shifts in helping you get closer to that true loving version of you. And it's, I mean, since then, obviously there's been a lot between then and now, but that was one of the first big shifts I think I really noticed in you, which was amazing because I love to give love and obviously I love to receive it. And it was coming through much more at that point after the psychedelics.
Yeah, I would say that probably a thing that psychedelics, and I don't recommend it for everybody, but for people who are further along in their journey, it can help. And I think that what it did for me was it allowed me to kind of see past this false identity I had created for myself and kind of be like, oh, I'm not that person. I'm this, you know, I remember thinking like, what happened to that like sweet little boy that like used to pick flowers for his mom? Like, where'd he go? Yeah. You know, he's become so like, so rigid and harsh and brash, and that's not my true self. That's my conditioned self. So how do I get back to like who I truly am?
Yeah.
And so, and yeah, my sense of control changed completely because it was really, the first night was really, really hard because I tried to control it and it got so bad. Yeah. And I was like, why was it so bad? And it was like, the messages that I got was, it was so bad because you try to control everything and you're going to ruin every relationship that you have if you try to control everything. And the reason why is because people bring variables and you just have to be okay with the unknown. Yeah. And I was like, oh, it all starts to make sense. And so it's not about just doing the psychedelics, but it's also about the integration of whatever you learn into your real life. And that's actually what kind of started happening. Yeah. And then, so, I had worked on myself and put a whole lot of work on myself. And I've slowly started to feel like my false, constricted, really tight, I gotta just like white knuckle my way through life started to kind of slowly dissolve, and it's still slowly dissolving, 7 years later. But you went and did it years after the first time I did it, a couple years after the first time I did it. And what was really interesting about our relationship is you at this point still had never been into self-development. Yeah. And so it took you 5 years into our relationship before you even started thinking about it. So for people that are out there that always send me messages and they're like, well, my spouse doesn't like to read and they don't like to go to conferences. Well, my girlfriend didn't for the first 5 years of our relationship. And I have been obsessed with trying to improve myself for, you started getting into it 13 years after I did, right? So it was like a long time. And my whole thing was just like, hey, maybe it's something that I'm into and I can just accept that it's not something that she's into. And that's where I got to. I had bought you books. I had said, hey, let's go to conferences. Let's do these things. Let's hire coaches. And you're like, no, I'm good. Because your original perspective on self-development was what?
I thought, because especially like what I'd seen with you, I knew your past. And I mean, of course, you would throw up like that Tony Robbins, I'm Not Your Guru video. And I would watch it and I'd be like, wow, these people have gone through such intense traumatic situations, and you lost your dad and he was, to alcoholism. And I mean, I looked back on my own, life and childhood and it was just great. There's like no big traumatic events. Nothing really terrible had happened. So I believed that
it wasn't perfect, but
it wasn't perfect.
It wasn't trauma filled.
Right. But, you know, of course, when I hear other people's stories and hearing your story, I thought, oh my God, these people have this like major stuff that they had to go through. No wonder they're into personal development, because they need to heal that. But I don't have anything. I don't have anything wrong with me. I didn't think I was perfect, but I just didn't think that, I don't know. It's almost like I didn't think I qualified for it or something.
Right. So then the universe rocks you as the universe does.
Yeah.
And you had a friend and her two daughters pass away.
Right.
And it was interesting because when I had come back from doing psychedelics, it was you and 3 of your friends were sitting outside that week and like asking me all of these questions and like, oh my God, you seem so peaceful. It seems like you've gotten so much from it. Then, you know, the things happen with one of your friends and her 2 daughters. And then all 4 of you decided to go do psychedelics.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how that shifted your perspective of you, of life, but also of love in general.
Yeah. Well, there was just, I mean, it was a lot at once, because I lost my friend Nicole and her 2 daughters in January. And by March, we went on our trip to Costa Rica. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot that happens and a lot that you think about when you lose somebody that you're close to. And so it made me ask a whole bunch of questions and think things through completely differently. And then going and doing psychedelics, like literally just flipped everything on its head. And I became so much more aware of myself, and also completely opened me up to spirituality in a new way. And so it was like, holy shit. I came back from that fully seeing, okay, there's a lot that I need to work through. There's a lot that I did work through, but I need to integrate it now. And there's this whole other realm, like dimension. There's so much more beyond what is here in front of me, which I think that in itself too was just like, oh my God, like energy and just everything made so much more sense because I learned about it while I was there, but I experienced it. And so that I think was the biggest shift for me to step into personal development.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, it was crazy. Like you just decided to start getting into personal development. So you started reading books and learning about yourself and, you know, getting a certification in heart math. And you got all of these different things that you started doing. And, and so it shifted a lot for you. And that was, I think, a big change for both of us. And I think that one of the biggest pieces because, you know, a lot of people say like, there's 2 different sides. Either relationships are supposed to be hard or relationships are supposed to be easy. And I don't think that it's either one, but I do think that it becomes easier if both people are working on themselves. And I think that our relationship became a whole lot easier when it was me working on becoming the best version of myself and you working on the best version of yourself, and us realizing that if we were triggered, it was not the other person's fault. It was just something that happened and we became triggered, which is our fault, versus blaming it on the other person.
I'm just glad you waited for me to get into this, because if I was you, I might have been like, you know, you do your thing, you be on your path, but it is challenging. So I understand when there's people that come with the question of, you know, what do I do if my partner isn't into this? Because you start to notice the things that are holding you back, and you could see it maybe, you know, what's happening for them, and you want to help them, but you can't make anybody do anything. But, you know, everybody comes around. Obviously, I am an example. When the time is right, and you know, you just have to trust that it's going to happen exactly as it's supposed to. You can't force it, and you wouldn't want to, because then it wouldn't be authentic. And the only reason why it becomes easier when both people are working on themselves is because both people wanted to. Yeah. And I think that's a big key point. And that's really what people are looking for when they start getting into self-development is, I'm starting to work on myself. It'd be really nice if my partner put in the same amount of effort for themselves, because I think our relationship would be better. But, and I'll tell you, you know, when we get into it in just a second of like why we each decided to be with each other, why I decided to stay, because that's a piece of it. And we'll talk about that at the end. But, you know, there were so many benefits of being in the relationship anyways, and so many benefits of you that I was like, okay, maybe this is just my thing. Like some people are into golf
And some people are not. I was like, maybe this is just my thing that I'm into, is just improving myself. And yeah, I did have a little bit more turmoil in my childhood than you did. So maybe that's just the way that it goes. Yeah. And I do think that our relationship got a lot better after we both just went, well, I'm going to work on myself and I'm going to be dedicated to this thing.
Yeah.
Another thing I think that was really big in our relationship that's been very different than everybody else's is we never, ever really cared about other people's timelines. And so, everybody else has these different timelines of, oh yeah, you've been together for a couple years. Now it's time to get engaged. And so we never really gave a shit about that. We always just kind of like, hey, we're having a great time. We're traveling. We were going on long trips every single year. Basically, we both worked from home. We spent, at this point in time, we've probably spent more time, physical time in each other's presence than a couple that's been together, married for 50 years. Cause we're together all day, every day, basically. Yeah. And so like most people were like, oh, we had so many family members that were like, when are you guys going to do it? When are you guys going to get married? When are you going to get engaged? And so we didn't get engaged for 7 years. And then we didn't get married until,
9 years,
almost 9 years. And so, we never really went by anybody else's timeline. So I have an idea of why I think that is for me and my perspective, but I'm curious your perspective of like our timeline compared to other people's timelines.
Well, I think if you compare it to other people's timelines, they would think we, took things really slowly.
Yeah. Or other people's expectations.
Yeah. To be honest, I think something that's really important is just to do what feels right to you. And that's all we ever did was just what felt right to us. Yeah. I think you and I also fall under the same belief that marriage isn't really going to change anything. Right. So we really had everything we wanted with just being together. And we had already been living together for a while. We had bought a house. There wasn't really anything that was holding us back from feeling totally safe with each other because of all this work we'd been doing. We weren't looking for something outside of us to change what was happening between us. Yeah. So the marriage wasn't going to change anything. So I don't think I think that's why we didn't feel rushed.
Yeah. And, I've just never really cared what people think all that much.
Yeah, you don't care about that. There is 0% of Rob that cares what anybody thinks about him ever, which is nice. It's been a good example for me because I haven't always felt that way. And I can't say I truly do yet. There's still parts of me that care, but not like you working on that.
I just feel like, and it goes back to I do believe in, and we could talk about this in a future episode, but I really truly believe deeply in my intuitive sense that I do have. I think my intuition is very strong.
It is very strong.
And it's never really swayed me in any sort of way. And so for somebody who doesn't know me as well as I know me to try to tell me what I should do with my life or how I should act has never really resonated with me.
That's so true.
And so I think that for a lot of people, it just you become more confident in yourself. You become more confident in your intuition, in your path in life, the more that you work on yourself and the more that you are like, hey, yeah, this is who I am. And as we're on it, there was never a moment where I was like, oh man, we should hurry up and go by other people's timelines. And then it happened perfectly, exactly as it should. Yeah. And I'll say this. Then we decided to get married. Yeah. And as we decided to get married, then we were like, should we do a wedding? Should we not do a wedding? Family people wanted us to have a wedding. Then we started thinking about how many people would be there and what it would look like and stuff. Yeah. And so then, we talked to other people that are like, well, yeah, we didn't want to have a wedding, but we did because my parents wanted us. And we started talking to people who we started realizing that some people had rushed their relationship because of other people outside of them that wanted them to rush the relationship, like their parents or their family. Then we found other people, sometimes the same people, who they wanted to just go and elope somewhere, but they had this huge wedding. There was a huge hassle with a whole bunch of people that they kind of knew and didn't really know. And they felt obligated to invite someone because their mom said, this person used to watch you when you were 3 years old and you haven't seen him in 30 something years. And we were like, you know what? Let's just go and get married one day. And so we decided, I called up my friend, who's the friend who you and I actually went on the brunch that you left me at, our friend Alan, who we're both really good friends with. And Alan's already an ordained minister or whatever the phrase is. Yeah. And I call him up and I was like, hey, do you want to marry us next week? And he's like, sure. And so it was me, you, him, And then John, who's behind the camera right now, who's the videographer, he was there taking pictures. And Bear. And so it's basically me, you, and Alan, and we did the ceremony, and then we went to our favorite restaurant, and it was perfect, exactly as we wanted it. We got married, and we didn't have to do the whole hassle, but we did kind of what we wanted to do.
Yeah, before that, we did a cacao ceremony. It was a love and gratitude ceremony on 2/22/22
in Tulum.
That was fun. And then we also did afterwards, after the legal ceremony with Alan, we had like a dinner with our closest family and friends. It was just like a celebration of being
25-30 people at our house.
Yeah, but it was great because I think what we wanted was just to bring the people that we love the most into one space, to have them all together, because that to me was like the coolest part of a wedding, is that you get to have all these people in one place together to celebrate. And so we did that. That's what we wanted to do. So it all looked a little different than what like the classic wedding situation looks like now, but it felt right for us, and I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah, it was great. The one thing that I've noticed though is that as we were talking about making this episode, is that we've noticed that with every like major life event, I feel like we've actually become closer in everything that with the doing psychedelics, with traveling, with seeing the guy who was the therapist, with
starting
your business, with us getting engaged, with us getting married. A year and a half ago, Toby, your dog passed away. Your dog, originally my dog as well, baby, passed away. And every life event that tends to happen, I feel like it can test a relationship, but with testing a relationship could also make the relationship stronger. And I feel, I'll give you my perspective, you give me yours, that everything that's ever happened to us, our relationship just tends to get more and more strong. And I think we actually find more ways to love each other through everything that happens. Yeah,
it really has. And it's been kind of like the silver lining of the harder things, because it gives you an opportunity. It's given me an opportunity to see you in a new light, because there's like a new depth that we've reached together. It's always been like really beautiful, and it's cool because our relationship is so amazing, and it deserves this like certain level of respect. One of the most quality relationships I've ever had, if not like the most quality relationship. And so I feel like it deserves a lot of respect. And when these things happen, the respect that comes out of you and the respect that I want to like show up with when you know somebody that you love so much is going through something, or they really need you, it's like you just step up because it means so much.
Yeah. And
so it's been, like even through like the harder things, it's created really beautiful opportunities to step up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And, what I want to finish us off with is, and obviously now you guys have, about 40-ish minutes of getting to know me a little bit better, getting to know Lauren a little bit better.
No, this is long for you guys.
Yeah, this is long for this podcast, right? So if you guys have questions that you want to ask us, you can go to askrobandlauren.com, and you can just put questions down that you want us to answer in future episodes or topic ideas. The more detailed your questions, the more that we can actually give really detailed and thorough answers. So if it's like, why are you together? That's a hard thing to answer. But if it's like more in depth, we can try to do it. And whether it's on relationships, whether it's on life, whether it's on, being a man or being a woman, or, our masculine sides, our feminine sides, any of those types of things, whatever question you guys have, you can go to askrobandlauren.com, and I'll finish it off with why we decided to be with each other. Because someone had sent us a message and said, how did you know that Lauren was the one? And I was like, I personally don't believe that there is just one person in this earth that's made for you. I think that you find somebody that you align with very well, and you decide, hey, this is a person I'm going to work with. This is a person that's worth me putting in the effort and the having hard conversations when hard conversation need to be had, and putting in the effort. So I changed that question instead of like, how did you know she was the one? Because I don't think there was like one moment where I was like, oh my God, she's the one. But I think it's just a lot of little moments that kind of showed me, this is what I want. This is what I want my children to experience, all of that. So I'm curious with you, for you first, and then I'll go. Okay. Why did you decide to be with me?
Well, I think I've kind of actually touched on this a little bit, but the main things are safety. I've never felt more safe with anybody. I mean, obviously I felt a lot of safety with my parents, but with you, that was never a question.
What do you mean? Do you mean
Safety,
physical
like-
safety or emotional safety?
Both, actually.
Okay.
And I'm glad you asked that, because it was both. Safe to be vulnerable, safe to be myself. Physically, like, I knew you would never put us into some, crazy situation. I trusted you a lot. You've always given me plenty of reason to trust you. You've never really given me any reason not to, which is huge. And then also, I just have so much fun with you. And I genuinely enjoy being around you. Clearly a lot, for large quantities of time. You make me laugh. And I think also you've always managed to impress me. I've always been like, whoa, because I always want to take things to a level that I might have never even imagined. So like, you've shown me so much more is possible. And that's exciting. That's so freaking cool and fun. So it was like, for me, it's all of those things all together that was like, this is a no-brainer. Yeah.
Mine was, and I've told you this before, is I was like, wow, this woman loves so deeply. And so I think that one of the reasons why I was able to experience you with Toby is because I was like, oh my God, if she loves that dog, which I love that dog so much too, as deeply as she does, and gives love so freely and so amazing, like how amazing would it be for her to for me to start to be able to experience that and know it and be able to like, oh my God, can I open myself up to it? Is it safe to open myself up to it? But also like, what would it be like to raise children in that environment of just like, love is omnipresent, right? And so for me, I think that was the main thing. Obviously, we have a lot of fun. We get along real well. We almost never have fights. We might have little like bickering things that last 15 seconds at most.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing was I was like, yeah, I think that I feel, and going back to safety, I feel emotionally safe. And this is something that we're going to talk about the next time that we talk about. We have another episode that's going to be called something like What is Love? When we talk about love, which is, I don't feel like you ever tried to change me or tell me that I couldn't do something, right? And so that's big for me because I like doing crazy shit and I like doing things that people have never done before, that I've never done before. And every time I'm like, hey, I want to try this thing, you're like, okay, cool, go for it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I felt very supported and it was always just, I see love as acceptance almost as interchangeable. And I think that I always just felt like I was always accepted as I was. You never wanted to change me. You never wanted me to be different. You never wanted me to be who you wanted me to be. But just like, hey, I'm going to love him as he is. And so I felt like that was omnipresent. And then I was like, I see how much she loves that dog, and I want my children to be raised in that in a house that feels that.
Yeah.
So that's my answer.
I love that.
I love that too. So everybody, once again, if you have questions for us, you can go to askrobinlauren.com. We're going to do some more of these. I don't know how often we're going to do them. Maybe once a month, maybe twice a month. Who knows? But you can go ahead and go to that website, and we'll start talking a little bit more. There's, there might have been, we planned this over breakfast, so there might have been things that we missed. I'm sure there's things that we missed over our relationship. And once again, we never think that we're perfect or that we've got it all figured out.
Absolutely
at all.
Not.
Really what it comes down to is we're just going to authentically share who we are as people and ourselves. And hopefully people can say, oh man, I learned something from that.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's what we got for you for today's episode, everybody. If you love this, please share it with a friend. Share it on your Instagram stories and tag me in it, Rob Dial Jr. You can also tag Lauren. Yeah. Lauren Pena Dial is her Instagram. And with that, I'm going to leave you the same way I leave you every single episode. Make it your mission to make someone else's day better. I appreciate you, and I hope that you guys have an amazing day.